Well, hello there, and welcome to a very special Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor Dupre. We are not on Book Club Island today. We are, in fact, on Imagination, I think the region is called. Let me check. We're on the auditorium stage at the SL birthday party because Second Life is, in fact, turning 18. And I believe it's turning 18, the world, she, he, they are turning 18 on June the 23rd, but I'll verify that. And my very special guests today, Philip Rosedale, co-founder of Linden Lab, founder CEO at High Fidelity, and Professor Tom Boellstorff, professor at the Department of Anthropology at the University of California at Irvine. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And welcome, Tom.
Thank you so much.
And Philip, you are not ever coming in with your updated avatar. You are completely wedded to your original avatar. Is this, in fact, the original avatar, or
No.
is that the one that was rebuilt?
This is not the original. In fact, I've been kind of searching for it, trying to find the old one. I guess this was probably maybe generation 2 or something. I always stuck with my avatar, but I like the original one best, which was the one that I built at our Build an Avatar contest that we had internally during Linden World before Second Life launched. But that was the one I like. Yes, thanks, Proc. That's right, 2.0.
And I will take extensive audience questions, and please pipe it in here if you have comments. We have a lot of old bees in the audience. They probably know a lot more than I do. Maybe they even know more than Philip does. Who knows? So let me just get this out of the way because this is, of course, a book club, and usually we invite only published authors. So Philip, I invited you because I figured, first of all, you wrote the introduction to the 2007 classic Second Life guide. So you are, in fact, a published author, and also you authored an entire world building universe. So I think we're fine. Here, I throw up a slide. This is me reading the official guide. I actually have it. And Philip, we just talked before the show. You don't have this book, The Second Life of the official guide?
Oh, I have that one. I was referring to Tom's book.
Ah.
I do have Tom's book, but I can't find it, and so I just ordered another. May you all do the same.
Exactly, and may you actually order it from Tom and have it signed. Now, when you guys started with Second Life, were you confident about the longevity of Second Life?
I certainly wasn't. It had always been my dream to build a virtual world, and I started the company in, 1999 in a warehouse in San Francisco, not knowing what would happen. Andrew and I, my friend from college, were the first two people there, and we, worked at length on crazy hardware. So no, I didn't know, but I always felt that at some point something like Second Life would exist. I wasn't sure whether the technology was yet ready in 1999 for it to, succeed in a big way, like it did.
And actually, it's in the trailer of the Our Digital Selves movie. We'll talk about it later on, where you said that there is a saying. I don't know if you came up with it or if this makes the rounds in Silicon Valley. You said that for a startup company or a startup person, there's no discernible difference between being too early or wrong.
Quite right. I agree. I still agree.
So you were not wrong, obviously.
No, I remember being asked that at one Second Life was at its largest. I remember being on a press tour and having somebody ask me that same question, and I said to him, no, I had no idea whether it would work or not. And he said, "What did your parents think?" I thought that was a great.
Yeah,
that was a great exchange. What did my parents think about that?
About the idea, about the concept?
About whether the horror of founding a company and putting my own money into it, building something that no one had any idea whether it would work or not. And that it is true. Second Life had no investors for the first couple of years, and it only had me. funding everything. So it was a bit of a crazy thing to do, but it was the thing that I had always wanted to do.
Tom, I'll bring you in a second, but I have one question that because I think I asked you this before, Philip, and from the outside of Silicon Valley, sometimes I have that weird feeling that, and maybe this is a newer thing, is that longevity and sustainability in a business is not necessarily valued as much as it should be. So if you could riff on that, because the mantra is always, start something, fail quick or fail fast, and then redo it, and then sell it. So the longevity of Second Life, I personally think, and many here obviously think the same, is an amazing achievement. But I was just wondering your sense within that microcosm of Silicon Valley folks.
That's a good question. There are many ways that we as people build things, and obviously, especially lately, we've appropriately really been re-examining the societal mechanisms that we use for things, particularly the economic ones. And, capitalism and the venture capital process, which is certainly what Second Life went through, at least after those first couple of years. Yeah, it's one way of building things, and it does focus on fail fast, succeed fast. And that's just because over time, competitive pressure in a free market, yields a expected outcome that is kind of standardized by all the other competing companies. And so, yeah, you're right. Everybody wanted Second Life to be big or gone in a few years, and that's how everybody treats every startup. And I think that and I think there's a lot of experiments happening now that are interesting, but as we as human beings continue to build companies, maybe now with all the technology we have and different things that are happening and all the kind of revolutionary thinking that's going on, maybe we'll come up with better ways to fund the average company. But yeah, for now, it's still, put some money in and hopefully get a really huge return in a few years, or get out and work on something new. And Second Life wasn't quite that, was it?
hmm And Tom and I, we talked about this too, because the problem that Tom, and first of all, Tom's book here is on the table, Coming of Age in Second Life. Uh, Tom, you said this many times, that one of the problems is researching Second Life with its rich culture as a world. The obstacle, the problem is that people see it, primarily as a technology platform, and I mean, the way the world works, like Philip is saying. I mean, there's the tech journalist, the dog is chasing another squirrel, while these wonderful cultures mature and spread, and it's just this cultural richness. Talk a little bit about that, Tom.
Wow, that's it's a great question, and it's something. It's so hard to even know where to start.
Well, let's start,
Right
for example, with the
now,
research grants, because you do get research grants, and I was wondering, if you put in these grants, do people come back to you from the National Science Foundation and go like, "What, Second Life? That's like 2006. What are you talking about?"
Drax, we've
there I
got
have
Tom.
my
Tom's audio
mic
is off
off.
to the
I
audience.
have it
Oh,
Yeah,
on. I
that
put
was
it
what
yeah.
I
on,
was
and
saying earlier. I think we can't hear Tom.
no, now
Tom,
now
you
it
have
should be
to.
on in both. It's
Okay.
back. I got it on. Um,
Awesome.
so So a couple things. One, for me, when I wrote Coming of Age in Second Life, I did it with basically no grants because I couldn't at that point. Nowadays, it's more possible because people understand the value of these things to study them more than in the old days. But I'm finishing a book right now, as you know, Drax, about the Intellivision video game system that ran between about 1978 and 1981. And building off what Philip was saying, the question of the commodity is really interesting. Like that video game system, right, which was around the same time as Atari, after the crash, Mattel Electronics went bankrupt. They stopped making it. There's sort of a retro community that kept doing it. During the day, there was a small fan club. But something like Second Life is also an online, society and culture. It's more than just the product. And in a sense, in television was more than just the product. But there is something about online communities that they are deeply shaped by the commodity model, but they aren't not in quite the same way. And that means they can have these really interesting lifespans, because even the whole Earth Electronic Link, which is sort of the first online community in a sense, is still
Mm,
around, right?
mm,
And so there's a way that the commodity model for online platforms is different once you have this sort of cloud aspect to it. And that's something that is really very interesting. So, in terms of the support to study it, it's a little better nowadays, although it's still not great. And I think a big issue around studying these things, and it's appropriate for today, talking about the birthday kind of thing, is, as you know, I've done research in Indonesia for many years, and no one asked me, why do you still study Indonesia? But
right.
people will ask me that about Second Life because of the
Yeah.
effect of the hype cycle, where you're only supposed to study the stuff that's new. And you and I experienced that, Drax, of looking at Animal Crossing and Second Life, both of which are so important. But the Animal Crossing, in a sense, made sense to people because it's new. So of course you would study it. And
Oh, we're
that's
not
very
allowed to
damaging.
use we're not allowed to say Animal Crossing in Second Life. I'm just joking. Uh,
Oh.
Real quick, I threw up a slide here in the back. This is when we visited you, Philip, at the High Fidelity headquarters, and here's Tom on the right, and he's taking a photo of the very first Second Life server that is framed here in the wall of this conference room. Because people are asking me, what do I see here on the slide? Yeah. Now, Tom, has Second Life matured? I mean, I always say that actually the fact that the tech press moved on for Second Life creatives for the culture that I mean, in many ways, this is my personal opinion. I think this was the best thing that could have happened. I mean, it's difficult for a company to run it, of course, but the the scrutiny and that sort of very short term sort of parachuting in um, of the press when that stopped, people were just really kind of flourishing, I felt.
Well, it's a really interesting point, is that in some ways Second Life is new. Like the things that are happening in Second Life in 2021 are new. They're shaped by the pandemic. They're shaped by the people who are here now. There's all of these amazing communities and things happening in Second Life that were not here 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So it's not old in a sense, right? That's the thing about this kind of technology. Like if you have Pac-Man arcade game or in television and it's from 20 years ago, it's old in a sense, right? Even if you play it in 2021. But so much of what's going on in Second Life is new, obviously. And so it scrambles that language of old and new, because
Mm,
human societies are in the present day, but they're always shaped by their histories. And that's what you got in a
mm.
space like this.
I want to talk a little bit about Ebbe Altberg, the CEO of Lindlab, who passed away last week. He meant a lot to me, as I'm sure to you guys and to people here in the audience and Second Lifers. I remember I was in Dublin at the Web conference, and he and Ebbe was interviewed by a local TV station, and we were not there, but he came out and he met us at a bar afterwards, and we asked him how did the interview go, and he said he was really he was mad, and he said, you know what, the first question the interview asked me on the air was like, why is Facebook such a success and Second Life such a failure? That was in 2014. So Philip, if you would have been in that position on the spot, like on live TV, how would you have answered this?
I think I would
I
have been
mean,
angry
yeah. I
too.
mean,
I mean,
it's aggravating, this conflation of just because there is a social component to both platforms.
I think it's fair to say that Facebook was something that has had general utility for all of the human population, and Second Life, and of course many other things have not as yet had that.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, it's that mix of. I think it's appropriate
I
to
mean, it was an
discuss and
economic
care
show. I
about.
mean, they were just talking about basically revenue, but
Yeah,
still, I mean, it's a legitimate question, the revenue question, but to lead with that in such a black and white way is just not good.
yeah. I mean, I always tend to think of it not in terms of revenue, but just in terms of human impact and human utility. And I do think that text messaging or something like Facebook, the wall and Facebook has had an impact that is enormous on human society. And I wonder, of course, when virtual experiences such as the one we're having right now will be something that billions of people will do. And I think that that question is a fair one. But you're right, that person was probably more just like, why aren't you guys making
It
tons
was
of
it
money
was a
too or
short
something?
segment on an economics show. Prokofy here says Facebook doesn't have gotchas, and then Eric says don't give Facebook any ideas. I put up a picture here of Ebbe Alberg. I met him in Amsterdam in 2015 to shoot a short video. It was a great time, and he was I think a great leader. Again, looking at it from the outside as a contractor, I'm not a full-time employee. Um, and I want to ask you guys how you knew him, and also more specifically what you thought he did right. Um, I just want to tell a little anecdote. I mean, it's not an anecdote. People may remember that when Ebbe's coming in was first announced, there was a headshot on the web. People were Googling him, and there was a photo of him with a green background. And I remember the SL community was saying like, "Oh my God, who is this guy? Yeah, this is another Microsoft corporate guy. He doesn't understand Second Life, and he knows nothing." And those kind of assumptions. And then, lo and behold, he came in and he had a very deep understanding of Second Life for many, many reasons. One being that his son was actually somewhat illegally in Second Life for a short time when he was 11 years old. It was very entrepreneurial, so very cool. But the initial image that was available of Ebbe, of course, we photoshopped it for my podcast and put it on the original newbie avatar and put a little cape around and created a little super Ebbe here. That was in February 2014. But Philip, what would you say about Ebbe and his leadership style? Maybe also the timing when he came in.
Well, you can't say enough good stuff about Ebbe. He's just an amazing, multifaceted person. I think, and it was a remarkable person to know. I didn't get to know him as a close friend, but I definitely knew him as a friend, and I knew him for a good deal longer than his being at the helm of Second Life. But I think what you're talking about that's most important about Ebbe was that he immediately recognized the core experience of Second Life and the community and the what was really happening here and what everybody in the audience here feels. And he just immediately recognized that. And it was an appropriate concern, I imagine, right? Since Ebbe was our, he was our fourth CEO, right?
Mm.
It was an appropriate concern that he might not see that. And as you say, perhaps he would be a sort of corporate person from Microsoft or whatever. But the cool thing about a really great thing about Ebbe was certainly that he immediately recognized and acted to cherish and preserve and celebrate the real experience that's going on here. That's what that's what I would say. But I could say so much about him. He's just a great guy.
Tom, how about you?
Yeah, I met him a few times. Early on, he actually showed me Sansar when it was still in the very preliminary development stages. They invited me up to Linden to give a talk after my book had come out, and he showed me an early version of Sansar, and we talked about Second Life, and it was really interesting. And then, of course, when we were doing the our Digital Cells documentary, we got to spend more time with him. And then I had other interactions over the years, and he just seemed incredible. I mean, he was an incredible, leader in the sense of sort of seeing what the potential of something like Second Life can be. And just 2 points to add on that. One is a big issue I think we still have in the tech space is understanding the value of medium-sized things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because everything is built around, Philip had said that he had the great phrase of the go big or go bust or whatever. If you say that a world like Second Life has 200,000, 300,000, 500,000 active users, that's big for
Mm-hmm.
me as an anthropologist. That's a big space that is valuable and successful by many metrics of success. And when the metric of success is the billions, and then you have TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and 5 other things, you miss so much. And there's a lot of room in the middle. There's a lot of space for online communities that are medium sized, and medium sized even meaning 5,000 or 10,000 people. And I think both economic models and analytical tools for thinking about the medium sized thing is something that is missing. And I think that's something that Ebby was good at thinking about,
Mm.
right? And so that's something that I think was amazing. And the other thing, and Drax and I talk about this all the time, is after all these years, more and more, like I just don't get it sometimes why people have a hard time understanding the value of something like Second Life. And I know it's the dominance of more game oriented virtual worlds of a Roblox or Minecraft kind of thing. And I know, there's other kinds of factors, but he deeply sort of understood the value of an open ended virtual world like Second Life. So it was amazing.
And also embracing everything. I mean, it's really like I remember long time ago I gave a talk at the Monterey Institute of International Studies to students, and they were really fascinated by Second Life. I did a piece about conflict resolution in Second Life, and the students totally got it. And then the professor was saying in the back, she said, like, yeah, but what about all the sex? Okay, I mean, that always comes up. And I had one thing that I think normal people only have one in 5 years. Philip is much better at sort of quick responses. I'm not, but I was very proud of myself by saying to the professor, said, well, if you go to Amsterdam with your kids or with your family and you arrive at the main train station, will you take a left to the red light district or will you go straight on to the Rijksmuseum? I mean, it's very common sense sort of navigating, and I don't even have to go to Amsterdam, I can go to San Francisco, any other bigger city. It's a very kind of common sense um, approach. So, I mean, is this still a thing though, Philip? I mean, is this something that annoys you? Because it still does come up that Second Life is just all pornography and weirdness.
Well, I think the sexuality of Second Life was more on display to anybody who started looking into it than perhaps the red light district of Amsterdam. But I would I would back up though. I used to say, let me just, not apologize, but point out in a critique of myself that, in 2006, I would say that with great certainty, all human beings would have a reason to go into Second Life, and that, or something that beat it, or something like that. That we would all be living our lives
Hmm.
substantially, or all of us would have a significant participation in virtual worlds. I will imagine that that's part of what drove Tom's excitement about investigating this space as an anthropologist, was that he was investigating what seemed to be a human frontier that would be
Hmm.
something that everybody would make some use of. Now, that hasn't happened as yet. And I might ask the question, is that because of the sex? Or is it because your computer is too slow?
Hmm.
Well, I sort of don't think so. I mean, I would defer to others here, but I would say not only that I was wrong in that prediction, but furthermore, I would say that I'm not exactly sure why still that hasn't happened. I can't put it in words. And I don't think I would say it's because of sex
Hmm.
or because of the computer being slow, because of course computer that you use to access Second Life has changed by, I don't know, I think 4 orders of magnitude in speed since we started the company.
This is really I think the biggest question. I actually have it here on my run sheet because I was going to ask, and we'll ask you this a little bit later, Philip. Why hasn't VR taken off now during the pandemic? And then the other question, you can mentally prepare for those. Why are you, Philip, now going basically to focus on spatial audio and kind of like a flat interface? And don't get me wrong, I actually think the what High Fidelity is offering, I think that's absolutely awesome and cool and has a very important place in this ecosystem. But we'll get there in a little bit. I mean, this is the big question. I get it all the time about the difficulty of Second Life. I don't buy it. We have a book club that is very successful, and I onboard 2 or 3 authors that have never even been in any game, and some of them are very
Right.
scared and skeptical. And yes, it takes hand holding, takes about 45 minutes, but they're able to sit, walk, chat, and build. And that's it in 45 minutes. So, um, yeah, let's bring that in a little bit later. Now, Philip, real quick, because when the question of CEOs, I actually just looked this up. The current executive chairman, because people are always want to know this kind of stuff. Brad Oberweger, and I think you know him. What do you know about him? Is he going to be good, or is he going to shut it all down?
Brad has been a personal friend of mine for a number. Actually, well, I met him more than 10 years ago, and we've been really good friends for the last few years. And in short, yes, Brad is someone who also instantly recognized and appreciated the beauty of what Second Life is. And I don't know how early, I don't know when it came up, but I just remember like Brad, gleefully saying, oh, could I do something with this? Could I work on Second Life? Could I actually be working there? It was just wonderful. So I think that Brad is, of course, a very different person than Ebe, but shares that immediate understanding and delight in, again, this experience. And I think we all know what I mean when I say this experience, what we're all doing, what it feels like to be here. So he's the same way. And I think it's going to be really fun to see what happens next.
There's some really good comments here. Chantal Harvey actually says the most comment that she gets sort of in casual conversation is when she talks about Second Life. Thank you. I already have a life. And Eric Mondrian says, I think a big part of it is that SL isn't compatible in some ways with the smartphone revolution and mobile. I mean, people talk about mobile all the time. But Tom, I want to ask you this about the life. Like, riff on this. I mean, is Second Life, is the name really the issue here? That people associated with something such, I mean, life is that's a pretty profound word, and language is a problem. I mean, language is kind of inadequate in many ways, not only yeah, in the context of virtual worlds.
I mean, because I love the name Second Life, but it can create some misunderstanding, right? Because of that first second thing. I mean, just to do a little corrective about what Philip was saying in terms of the way that someone like me thinks about Second Life as an anthropologist. When I do my research in Indonesia, it's not because I think I'll discover something there that will be about what all humans experience, but it's to understand one way of living a human life. Like we all speak a language, but English or German or Indonesian work differently. And so to me, the value of studying Second Life or virtual worlds in general is not necessarily that everyone will be doing Second Life or virtual worlds, but that it's going to become one option or one space in which we move. And in some ways, the Second Life name has created misunderstandings, and Roblox or Minecraft or something like that sort of can get away from that. In some ways, and so I don't really, people say, is it the interface that's difficult? Is it because it requires a computer and the lack of integration with mobile? And I also, I can't tell you for sure what the reasons are, or if we even need to be concerned about it, because like I said, Second Life is flourishing and doing very well. But I do think there is incredible untapped potential. And I'm actually surprised, and it'll be interesting to see in the next few months about lessons learned from the pandemic. I definitely have learned stuff from having taught in Second Life in the last year about when your university doesn't support it and the teacher has to teach it to the students each time. That makes a big difference compared to platforms that the university supports and the students learn for multiple classes. But the value of something like Second Life coming out of the pandemic is the climate impact, the disability access, the global access. There's incredible potential for open-ended virtual worlds, and so I'm still very interested in that question of what could their potential be, because I think it's so much bigger than it is.
Philip, you're putting here in local chat there are too many me's or me's. Steven
Sorry.
Spielberg. Steven Spielberg was using Second Life. Tell us all about it. Now we're cooking.
Yeah, someone the other day reminded me of that moment, and I don't think that I was there. I'm trying to think when it was, but the statement, never mind that it was Steven Spielberg, merely that statement, there are too many me's. I think what he meant was that looking down at his avatar and the people there, and perhaps those that were standing around him in the real world, in a room or something, he made that expression. I think that it's interesting. I think the challenge of being another person in the way that we do here is a very substantial one. And in fact, I think we've seen a little bit of this both in the problems, the immense problems that VR headsets have faced, as well as the pandemic. I think that, going back to what I said earlier, that I still don't quite understand, why everyone in the world doesn't, hasn't been in Second Life once in a while, or hasn't used it once in a while, as by comparison, for example, people do Facebook. I think is one of the elements is that to truly become another person and live in another world is extraordinarily both enriching and compelling, and also
Scary.
difficult. Yeah,
Scary for a lot of people. I think you put the finger on, and I was going to say, Philip, because I feel exactly like you. I mean, I have this ambition, maybe more on an obsessive evangelist level, where I look around myself and go like, okay, this person will have an advantage. They will get something out of Second Life, or something Second Life-ish, and they don't know about it, or they're scared, and now
So wait, Rax, I'm
yeah,
going to jump in and grab the microphone of the
yes,
interviewer for a
please.
second to ask Philip something here, because this is a very interesting point, and it has to do with what is necessary to a virtual world versus what is about the contingent history of virtual worlds like Second Life. So, Philip, when you all founded Second Life back in the day, we know you were influenced by things like Burning Man and by the idea of being a different person, as you said. So the platform of Second Life was created, for instance, so that I couldn't be Tom Boellstorff. I had to pick my last name from a list. There is in the profile a First Life area that you can leave blank, and that most people do leave blank. Now, Facebook is a social network site that really tries to require that you have your physical world name and be the same person online that you are offline. Those are not fundamental factors of the platform. They are contingent design decisions. So please go back with me 18 years and let's imagine a world where Facebook requires that you have a fantasy name. That in Facebook, I'm going to be Crazy Rabbit, and I have a made up identity, and I make a social network with people like that. And that 18 years ago, Second Life is created in such a way that I have to be Tom Boellstorff, you have to be Philip Rosedale, that you don't have this separation of being a different person. Because this issue that you're raising about the challenge of being someone else and that kind of multiplicity and there's too many me's actually has nothing to do with the technological affordances of the platform itself. And there are versions of Facebook that are based on anonymity. And there are kind of virtual world spaces building off of like workplace, Slack kinds of things that don't. So I think there's a danger here of getting two things confused with each other about the promise of virtual worlds. Because the issue of being a different person and having a second kind of life thing, I love it. I mean, I think that's really interesting. Most games are based on that. I'm not saying I have any problem with that. I just think it's really interesting and important to disentangle that from the question of the kind of online platform that you're talking about. So I'd be so curious for Drax and Philip, any thoughts or comments that you or people in the audience have about that, because I do think it's really important to think analytically about the fact that this is a contingent fact of history that things have sorted out in the way that they have.
I have Philip answer that, but I just want to clarify, Tom. Are you basically asking Philip if they hadn't made the choice in the very beginning with those name associations, which I thought was actually an integral part of the initial cultural framework, that it would have gone differently?
Thank you. Drax is a very good interviewer for making things simple. Yeah, like imagine a Second Life where everyone had the same identity that they do in the physical world. And what do you think the pluses and minuses would be, or how might the history of this 18th birthday be different if all of us in the room, it was more of a Facebook situation where everyone had the same physical world and online identity? How would this 18th birthday be different if Second Life was like that?
Wonderful. Well, let me say, for those who haven't heard it before, it had always been my dream to build a virtual world, but not necessarily a virtual world that looked just like Second Life. I had dreamed since college about building, about making things, because my background was mechanical and electronics and and wood. I mean, I loved building things. I still do. And so the vision that I had that made me leave Real Networks and start the company in 1999, and as I said, put the first $1 million or so into it before there were any investors, was one based around the dream of being in a place where you could make anything, but with primitives rather than with atoms. As you said, Tom, things like the choice to use the last names, and that came from this idea of a community, creating an extended family for yourself and having that family be the size of the Dunbar number, that was a decision. I don't know whether it was my decision or design idea, but it was certainly one that I loved. But the idea of the avatar and the expression of the self, and the expression of the self usually as being a different kind of self, or a chosen name and a chosen family in a new world, those were things that emerged from the earliest times that we had other people, including everybody in the company, in the world. So the initial dream of Second Life was of a garden. Andrew Linden will tell you that what I used to rave about was the idea of just being in some sort of primeval garden that was simulated across many, many computers. There's that wonderful island whose name I can't remember now, that was one of the first sort of many scripted plants and creatures and things. And I used to just rave about it all the time in the press because I loved it so much. That the initial idea was that. And I would ask an interesting question to your point, Drax. How would this birthday be different if there were no avatars at all? What if we had to act on the world, but we couldn't form these bodies that we have? Svarga, thank you. Ingrid Ingersoll, thank you. Svarga, that was the place. What would it be like if we had no avatars? I wonder that a lot. It's a fascinating question, because that, to me, the definition and the detail and the expressiveness of the avatar, that was a very significant change and focus that we made by about, say, the third year in. But the initial work was, as I've mentioned before, it was actually this crazy, better than the Oculus type of interface device for, more like the film Avatar, for putting you into a virtual world. And the world itself was designed to be a kind of a gigantic construction kit. But the first avatars we had were just kind of floating spheres. I didn't like the idea that we would have bodies at all at the outset.
See, this is to me fascinating. I mean, obviously, I have my opinion, and people are extremely opinionated on the subject in the VR space. You will find any number of people who will say, well, the avatar is really not that important. If I have two floating hands where I can point and grab stuff, that's all I need, or some sort of like indicator that there is another person over there, maybe by way of hands, or some sort of I don't know, glowing ball that shows that there is a head or something. I mean, that doesn't appeal to me at all. I mean, the body part is important, but people argue that with VR now. But the question here is, and this is interesting. I'm going to put up a slide here because Philip, you with high fidelity, you are now actually playing in a space where the avatar are little. There are little chips, little Las Vegas casino chips that are moving around. Explain real quick for people who don't know what you're offering there, and I'm putting up a few slides. And then maybe tell us, is that the conclusion that you reached, that the avatars maybe all you need is a circle with a picture in it.
I wouldn't I wouldn't say that it's a conclusion at all. I would still say it's a question, and I've been actively thinking about it in the last couple of weeks, uh, trying to sort of take another look at all of this. High fidelity was initially a bet on the Oculus Rift, much like Sansar was to a certain extent. So, because of course I was so enthusiastic about interface hardware that would let you be more immersed in a virtual world, when the Oculus Rift hardware, or more to say that the chips that were built into the Oculus came out, I was well aware of them as well. This was about 2013. We started, tinkering around with the same parts, and I came to the same conclusion as everybody else, which was that the Oculus Rift would work and that you'd be able to immerse yourself, at least your head and hands and maybe more of your body into a virtual world. And of course, we started High Fidelity, and again, a little bit like Sansar, for those who know Sansar, to really aggressively chase after the idea of building another big open virtual world based entirely on a new technology that would use these headsets. And I dwell on that both because it's interesting, and as we think about how Second Life is different than such a place, than a place that's fully that's accessible via head-mounted display, but also because the very first thing that we built to enable that world, even ahead of the HMDs, the Oculus Rift being available commercially, was an audio system that was designed to be kind of the end of audio, if you will. We wanted to make audio perfect. That is to say, we wanted to reduce the delay between when you speak and somebody else hears you to a point where, at least for regular conversation, it's indistinct. You can't detect it, and that's what High Fidelity does. And then we also wanted to make it so that any number of people in an event like this could shout and clap and ask questions. And if you were wearing a head-mounted display, you would hear them all, coming from where they were as avatars, exactly as you do in the real world. And so we built that technology. And then when we gave up on the Oculus Rift and decided that we as a company would fail if we continued to try and build a virtual world that was dependent on, the new Oculus Rift, Oculus Quest, we tried to we moved to commercializing the audio technology only, and that's what we're doing today. We have both a product that you were showing pictures of, as well as an SDK that allows spatial audio to be used. And of course, Apple just last week, finally, after all these years, announced an update to FaceTime coming soon that will perhaps, for a larger audience, show you precisely what we're doing with High Fidelity, which is spatializing sound.
I think it's really cool. Now I'm going to ask Tom this question because I know that I know Philip's answer. I don't know if I know it, but Tom, why do you think that VR hasn't taken off during the pandemic? I mean, this seems like a very obvious question, but also, I mean, we're working on this documentary. I mean, you're doing this research, and I'm doing a documentary about your research where you compare Second Life with Animal Crossing, or you take these two worlds, and the goal is to find out how during the pandemic. The engagement that we have and the interaction with virtual worlds and game worlds, what will change in the long run, what will change in the short term, what will stick, how will this change? And we talked a lot about, for example, education. And the consensus, I think, between us is that education in many forms, K through 12, and also adult education and so on and so forth, can benefit from the playfulness of a virtual world. And every teacher who has a Zoom fatigue will probably agree with that. But on the other hand, a simple video connection for the most part seems to work. So what's interesting, despite Second Life getting a 60% bump in March 2020 compared to March 2019, it seems that virtual worlds and especially, well, headset-based next generation virtual worlds are not really gaining any traction in a time where we're all socially isolated and we could, we don't have to be. Why?
Oh, I know the answer to that, Drax. Ha. All I can do is obviously throw some things out there, and there's so many great points people are making in the chat. By the way, it's like trying to keep up with all of that. But so a few things. One thing that I saw Proc mention and some other people as well is, in many cases, when we ask like, will this be good for people who want a separate identity or for people who want continuity of identity? The answer can be yes and yes, right? Because just like you can have more than one Gmail account, you can have more than one avatar account in Second Life or other places. And so often you don't have to necessarily make a choice. In terms of the VR, someone mentioned in the chat, VR is successful by many metrics already, right? It just depends, once again, on what we mean by success. Because if success means that everyone uses it all the time, well, then no. But that's not typically how, in the marketplace or elsewhere, success is being defined. And
Well,
so,
I was just role playing the guy who interviewed Ebbe in Dublin.
Right,
Why
right.
is VR such a failure, Tom?
Right, because once again, it's the iPhoneization of the world, where if everything isn't the biggest thing, it's useless. But so just to remember, because people get so confused about VR and VW, virtual worlds and virtual reality, that you can have VR that's not even on the internet at all, right? You can have a flight simulator on your computer unplugged from the internet. So VR is a completely different issue from virtual worlds, and the intersection of them can be really interesting. But sort of, as you're mentioning here, putting up Animal Crossing, one thing we've learned from the history of technology is that low bandwidth forms of interaction can be really meaningful to people. I mean, look at the incredible popularity of instant messaging and Twitter, even nowadays, right? Not everything is in, beautiful 3D color, whatever kind of thing. That low bandwidth, TikTok, even like things that are shorter or smaller or simpler, have a really interesting, use for lots of people. And Animal Crossing on the Switch, as you see there, is in some ways, very simple in terms of what you can do with the controls, but the incredible creativity of what people do in Animal Crossing and the social interactions that they have. And, that Switch you can plug into a big screen, but it's interesting that a lot of people don't. They're using it on that small screen because then they can be hanging out with their family doing that kind of thing. So, in terms of the VR, part of it is that full immersion can be difficult if you're trying to do other stuff. Part of it can be issues of motion sickness that still show up. Part of it is the expense and the bandwidth. I mean, we sort of know what these various things are, the lack of a killer app, etc. This is an example of this creativity happening very simply with bitmapped clothes in Animal Crossing, right?
And I just brought that up. Yeah, it's like
Yeah, I'm showing that right there. So it will. There's that famous John Naughton quote that people always overestimate the short-term impact and underestimate the long-term impact of new technologies. And so I think the jury is still very much out as to what will happen down the road with VR. But I know the basic answer is it will not take over everything, and it will not disappear. Between that's where it gets interesting.
I mean, this goes back to Philip's, belief, or I mean, will we won't be able to solve this, or we won't be able to predict the future if 8 billion people on this planet will embrace an avatar identity, or not. I want to read one comment here from YouTube. Bolly Coco says, first of all, she says, if Second Life requested back in time, around the time when Philip made this decision in the team, back in time, if it would have requested our real identity, we wouldn't feel free at all, and our experience would be so limited. That's what makes Second Life so unique. And then Bolly Coco adds, Second Life is the most powerful ever freedom. It's our deepest freedom, the one we often back off so often because of society, because of rules, because of molds. Pure freedom. I mean, we all, we're all part of a cult, so we're preaching to ourselves here. But how to communicate the power to the outside? I mean, that's still something we, I don't know.
Well, as our society is debating today, the only thing I would say about that is, with respect to freedom, is, do I then have the freedom to harm you? And you me? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think a stable world can exist where I have a profound ability to harm others. And I think that's a freedom. And so something to think about there, that I think technology in general, as it's grown in its impact, has gotten us into this question of, how much is enough, and right, how much freedom with respect to technology is enough, and what sorts of societies can emerge online that are stable and long lasting. Going back to the VR headset, though, I saw somebody make the quote that I was just really captures it. People won't use a platform where your child will punch you in the nuts and you won't see it coming.
I was gonna read it. Co-producer Strawberry Linden told me privately, "Don't read this comment. We're gonna get flagged on YouTube." But
well,
yeah, that's a great
sorry
comment.
for reading it then, but the thing that the VR headset has a pragmatic problem, which is quite serious, and we all know it here, which is you can't type. You can't type when you're in VR. There are various, hacky ways of doing it, but they're brutally difficult and frustrating. So because you can't communicate using text, and you can't make notes, and you can't, use your computer in a normal fashion, you are stuck making a very difficult decision to put this thing on. You have to use voice, which is, of course, not for everyone. But the second point, which I would bring up and maybe ask Tom if he agrees, is that there is a profound sense, I think, of discomfort when you blindfold yourself with a piece of hardware. And I saw somebody mentioning that, you can turn on the see-through mode on the Quest. Well, yeah, that's true. But still, putting something over your face that blocks out the people around you, even restricts your field of view, by the way, even if it were only that, I think, is a very uncomfortable, scary thing. And I think all of us, I often ask people with VR, I say, what's your favorite VR app? And they say something like Beat Saber. And it's wonderful, I just tried Beat Saber. And I say, that was your favorite VR thing. I said, how was it the second time you did it? And of course, they start laughing because there wasn't one. They had an experience that they described as transcendental in some way. And yet they never did it again. And I think the reason for this is the discomfort that we all have with being blinded and being vulnerable and endangered like that. And of course, the horribly discriminatory thing about it is that doesn't apply equally to different groups of people. And so unlike the keyboard and Second Life, the VR headset, I think, also discriminates and tends to create a homogenous population of people that are using it. Not entirely, but if Second Life had been, say, had a really way off, gender split amongst genders in the beginning, it would be there's no way it would have been successful like it has been. So I think that's one of the problems is the VR headset is it blinds you, and it's very uncomfortable to be blinded.
Well, I can make two quick comments based on that stuff. Great things that Philip was saying, and also what's showing up in the chat. I mean, one thing that's showing up in the chat, just to mention, is also the ableism of these different technologies. That there's people who are deaf for whom voice is not a good option. There's people. There's all. So anyway, there's that whole side of it. But two quick responses to really important points that Philip mentioned. Number one is this issue of setting aside the world around you and how that can be an issue with VR. And just think for a moment about the history of movies, because in many ways, an interesting parallel is movie theaters. That if we want to focus outside of ourselves for a time to watch a movie, historically, we would go to a movie theater, the pre-pandemic, but also, pre-internet, and sort of shut off the rest of the world for a couple hours, right? And people have written about this, right? The dark space, you're not supposed to talk, you're supposed to stay quiet, don't chew your popcorn too loudly, and have this thing, and then the credits roll and you go back out and it's really bright outside and you're blinking because it's so bright outside and you've been in this dark movie theater watching a movie. And in some ways, VR is like that. And if, moving forward, what will be the VR equivalent of movie watching nowadays, where you're all sitting around watching a movie on Netflix at home and everyone's got their iPhones or their other things and they're multitasking, yet we're sharing this movie together? Like, what would be the VR equivalent of that? It can't just be AR, because if you see through, you can't do a lot of VR kinds of stuff. So that's a really interesting question, because if you think about movie theaters, you wouldn't go and see a movie for 6 hours a day or 4 hours a day or even day after day. And this is the issue of using VR on a regular basis. If you see what I'm saying, there's a very interesting issue there. Another quick thing that Philip mentioned about being able to harm someone else, or these questions of harm, a really big issue, and this shows up obviously by no means limited to Second Life, is questions of governance and power. And that, when virtual worlds and online platforms are owned by for-profit companies, who makes those decisions about power and control? We see this going on with Facebook and Twitter bans, for instance, is a really interesting question. And there were times what many platforms try and do is offload governance off onto the users by doing things like being able to mute someone, expel them from your land, do this or that kind of thing. But obviously there's many kinds of issues that's not going to be sufficient for. And so it's also still an undiscovered territory in a sense, socially, but also legally and politically. How do we think about these forms of governance when these online communities transcend individual nation states, for instance? And so whose laws do you use? How much power do you give to these corporations when you do need governance on that level is a hugely interesting and unresolved issue.
Well, yeah, we can see with Facebook how unresolved it is. I mean, we have one participant in the upcoming film who's from Sri Lanka. I mean, I have 3 hours of conversations for the movie where he talks in depth about the failure of local Facebook management to curb anti-Muslim violence. But I digress, and we only have 3 minutes left here on the show. People can, of course, stick around, and maybe our guests have time to stick around. But since you mentioned ableism, I have a couple of slides here from the Our Digital Selves movie that stars Tom and a fella by the name of Cody de la Scala. And here is an image of, and Cody has cerebral palsy. He almost drowned as a 1-year-old baby. Here you see, I mean, this picture actually looks fairly violent. 3 people putting a Vive on him. No, wait a minute, there's an Oculus. And he's like, no, don't do that. But Cody loved VR. And here is an image where at Linden Lab headquarters in Sansar, we put the trackers on his feet, and he was able to use his VR avatar's hands by moving his feet around. So that was a little hack there. In closing, I would like to. I mean, I have a whole bunch of slides here of my own memories here. One real quick, and then I'll go to the final comments. Here is one, a mock-up of a comedy program that we did of a fake news show called Silly Valley. And the headline of Silly Valley's evening news was Second Life kicking the bucket. Of course it does. So we all know, as we wish Second Life happy birthday, that it's not kicking the bucket. But let's make the rounds. If you had one marketing idea right now, an important, the magic marketing idea right now, what would it be, Tom? In 30 seconds.
Oh my God.
Wait a minute. No, wait a minute. They do the elevator pitch. Do they still do that in Silicon Valley? It's got to be 12 seconds. And audience, by the way, too, what would you do?
Yeah, someone else help me out here.
Add water to mainland continents. There we go. So people in the audience and on YouTube, what should Linden Lab do now to really bring 8 billion people into Second Life? What has to be done, as Lenin once asked? Lower land prices. Restore voice to all regions. Philip, maybe adopt high-fidelity spatial audio to Second Life. How about that?
I'd love to see that happen.
Kick Vivox.
Maybe
Get high fidelity.
It's amazing to think that we got Vivox. Well, we helped Vivox get started a bit because I think we were one of the very first customers. And as somebody said the other day, we were doing this 15 years ago. That is spatial audio. Yeah, it was
It's
really
amazing.
cool.
Some of the authors I bring in today, they go in and then I walk away from them and say, "Oh wow, your voice is getting lower." I go like, "Yeah, I'm walking away from you." Oh wow, amazing. Mhm.
It is so fun to do this voice and chat format, isn't it?
Yeah,
Whenever I come back and whenever I'm here, I'm
that's
always
the killer
struck
app.
by how killer that is. Yeah, like I just want to. Maybe I'll do this more in the future. Just sit around and talk to people using both those modes because as a thinker or as a responder, a speaker, you can read pretty fast
Mhm.
and then respond. In other words, many people can talk and you can give answers pretty quickly. It's very interesting.
I mean, my idea would be mobile, and I know that Linden Lab is working on a mobile app. I would like to see a mobile app where you can also, be in the space. I mean, that was tried with SL Go, which was a cloud-based solution. So something like that, I think, would be very successful. Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, it just comes back to the creativity. Like to me, the incredible creativity that people have, because it's true, like mobile would be great, those other kinds of things. But if you look at like online gaming spaces and League of Legends and all of the esports stuff that's happening, those people are all using very expensive computer gear, but millions of people get that stuff, and are able to do it, right? And so, oh hey, so let's but so like I think all those things are great, but to me I just always come back to the creativity and community. It's the two C's, just the incredible creativity and community. Someone mentioned it before in chat that what people are able to do in Second Life, the unlimited creativity, is simply mind boggling. And
Yeah, but then
yeah,
we're talking
the
about a
voice and chat is great too.
communication. We're talking about a
Yes.
communication, a marketing problem too. How this is communicated, because I mean, we're talking about this all the time. As a matter of fact, I think Tom, we made the joke, "What is Second Life for?" And I think I said, or you said, "Well, Second Life is a place where people can talk about why Second Life is awesome."
That's right.
um, or why it does not grow, or whatever, or they know how to grow it. But the communication problem is interesting. I was at a Linden Lab meeting where a young new Linden Lab employee who is awesome. I'm not gonna name him, but he had a great idea, because I was talking about older folks, and older folks, some anyway, have disposable income, and he had the idea, let's go to senior citizen homes and do a presentation and bring laptops, preload Second Life, and have laptops, pass them out, and do a presentation, and bring them in. I mean, this is akin to doing workshops at the local community level for older folks, people who are mobility impaired, with simple basic Skype stuff. I mean, I think that's a valuable idea. I understand why Linden Lab or any company is after young people with disposable income, of course, but why neglect this large constituency? No.
I think that there's just so many things to say, but I do think, as you said, the tactical opportunity is certainly doing something similar to Second Life, doing Second Life on mobile. I have a 14-year-old daughter who builds in Minecraft solely on mobile, on an old, smaller iPhone. And it's staggering how quickly and how much complexity, how much she can build just using her fingers on a mobile screen turned sideways.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. So that's an inspiration to me that there must be a way to do something similar. Although I do think, and by the way, I have seen content. I mean, I do come and look at content to somebody's comments in there, and it is just staggering, right? I mean, it's just mind-boggling. I just stand in some of the places that I visit now, and I can't even believe, how shockingly amazing the content is. The things people are building. And I do think that it is critical to not just enable communication, but to enable creativity, as Tom said. That is
Yep.
the key. It's a combination of creativity and communication. And what I would also say is Second Life still has, and of course I'm very proud of this, Second Life still has a set of capabilities that no other products, even 20 years later, even come
Yes.
close to. So for
Copy
example,
mod transfer model.
like Roblox, for example, is really cool. And I think in a lot of ways, Roblox is amazing. I think in many ways, Roblox is Second Life for 12-year-olds, right? It's a it's becoming an adult, right? Like it's just another amazing system. But the capabilities of it with respect to creativity is nowhere near Second Life. Second Life is connected servers where you can walk for miles and content that can be easily moved from one place to another, right? That capability doesn't exist in any system. Maybe a little bit in VR chat, but again, VR chat doesn't have many of the capabilities that Second Life has either. So I'm pretty proud of the capabilities, but I do wonder how many how much creativity, how much capacity for creativity is needed to get something off the ground and into people's hands. And I think it's a lot. It's a lot more than people think. You really have to enable building. And as I said at the beginning, that was my original goal, was to enable building and nothing more in some sense. I wanted to just build with parts, with Lego blocks or Tinker Toys or whatever of some kind. And my goal in building Second Life at the outset was aggressively and only to enable a huge single space in which you could quickly and easily build things.
And thank you, Philip, for creating it, because I think your vision, and there's a great interview with you, 2006 or 2007 on CNN, where you stress that that part that you believe every person is creative. So, I mean, I see what you made here. You laid the groundwork in a very aspirational way, and there may be studies that say 90% of people in Second Life or any other virtual world platform just sit there and listen and they don't do anything, or they whatever lay under a money tree. Your vision to me was always aspirational, these people may be on the couch, but I can get them off the couch. Ironically, you guys are sitting on the couch now. But last words, because I got to wrap it, or I'll get smacked by the Linden Lab folks who are running this program. I'm just a mere host. And in the back here, we have a mock-up of a Wall Street Journal cover that we used from Machinima. It says "A Third Life" from Mr. Rosedale Brewing Decaf. Um, this is just for the insider, for the in crowd, if you understand what that is in reference to. Um, Tom, last words for the birthday boy girl world.
Well, thank you for doing this, and happy birthday, Second Life. And just the last thought I'll put out, built on some amazing chat that was just up, and I know I've forgotten who all put it up, but thinking forward about the amazing thing about Second Life is the way it was built for creativity for everyone, right? Before Mesh, before everything else. And throughout, I'm talking about Instagram and even things like Facebook and Second Life and Roblox and Minecraft. There is this tension right now between creativity for everyone versus a creative class and a group of people who are the content creators. And not everyone wants to create all the time. And for some people, creating might mean arranging furniture in a virtual home that someone else built the furniture. But what counts as creativity, and how do we think about democratizing creativity and pushing back against this tendency to have a separate creative class is a really important issue that is sort of baked into Second Life. And on the one hand, it's fine to have some people who are more expert at it and get paid for their labor. And not everyone is going to be a dancer or a musician or an actor. But on the other hand, creativity is fundamental to the human experience. And how do we also make that possible? And Second Life has been a heaven for amateurs. It's been an amazing place where people who are not, like myself, who aren't great at building can do that. So I think that's a really interesting issue that we'll see going forward. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Philip. There is a tip jar here on the stage. That money goes to Ruby and Shyla, who are running the book club on Book Club Island. We're back on the regular book club Wednesday. The book club show is every Wednesday, 12 o'clock Second Life time. And big thanks to Tom and Philip. Super big thanks to the audience. I'm going to stick around a little bit. Maybe Philip can or wants as well to take some. I was going to say user questions. Oh my God, people are going to throw tomatoes. Resident questions, and we're going to cut the stream. But I also want to say that here in the back, the image on the board is a disturbing one. This is me in real life, 2009, I believe, or 2010. This was an ad campaign, and I actually felt the ad campaign was conceptually really great. Maybe they should have taken other people who look a little bit less like child molesters or terrorists. But this is me on the left. Linden Lab contrasted that with the avatar. So I do believe in avatars. Thank you guys so much, and I hope to see everybody on the regular book club Wednesday, 12 o'clock. Thank you, Strawberry, for running the camera.
This is great. Thank you for having me. It is so fun to be in here. Just hang out for a while. I've got a little more time.